It's like you see what it outputs, and then you're working backwards into, well, I like it because this, and that. And you still need design fundamentals, design knowledge to understand why you like what you do like and why other options don't work. So basically, the way that photographs or renderings are created, you have a subject, right? You have things in view, and then as light enters a sensor or as light is cast on the 3D objects in a 3D space, that noise starts to become cleared up and you get over to a final image. Then that final image, you add tags to it. So basically a description of the image. So this is a modern, sleek apartment in New York, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of words and descriptors associated with that final output of the image. How these AIs are trained is they take a library of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of images that are prescribed. So they already come with descriptions within them. And then the process follows in reverse. It sort of generates a little bit of noise on the image and then more noise. And then ultimately that noise, like the diffused or the blurry image, still has those descriptors, right? So it's able to then start associating what buildings are just by how buildings start to disappear and how other objects disappear. That might be a little bit much to wrap your head around, but what you need to know is basically it's drawing from a giant library of images that all have descriptions. And then when you ask for a description, it then generates an image using that library. So in Midjourney, when you put in a prompt, a description or a text prompt of what you want, it comes up with 4 different variations following that prompt. And that's what's called a seed. So in this case, it would be completely random. And the seed is really just the starting point of where it starts generating the image, which will then change the output, obviously. So these are 4 different seeds, and they could be random, and it could be a number like 8, a number like 20, a number like 40. But what's happening is when you ask for variations on this one, which might be what we would call here like your variation 1, if you select that, it then creates 3 variations from that one. So it deviates from that seed, but just a little bit, right? To give you some other possibilities. Then let's say you select the one on the bottom right, it then turns out 3 other options along with a bit of variation on that one. And you're kind of honing in a little bit more into where you want your prompt to go until you finally get a higher resolution output. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? This is basically how a prompt gets set up. And if you go into that Notion, you go into that part of Midjourney, you'll see this, and you should be able to download it. It's basically you start out with a subject, then we get into details for what we want out of that image. Then we can add in anything about composition or about perspective. So if like you want a top-down shot or you want a wide angle, that sort of thing. Then style. So this could be the artist that it's influenced by, a time period. It could be whatever number of things that could determine a stylistic approach to how the image is going to end up looking like. And then you can add things such as color palette. So more style things, but you could be more specific. And then parameters are little commands that we can use, but we don't get into too much of that today. We're really just looking at creating this sort of process where we create a prompt and we then get a first generation, let's say, and then we can create 2 different options or rerun that same prompt with little tweaks. And then after selecting one variation, so here we selected variation 3, which would be this is 1, this is 2, this one on the bottom left is 3. So then here we have some variations based on 3. Then we ask for variations on 1, and then that's what we get as an output. And then we ask to upscale option 1 up here, and we get a final output in higher res. And then this is that same parallel happening with a different option. There's also a command in Midjourney to do blend. So you're able to actually upload 2 images that the Midjourney created or that you've taken yourself. I've even used sketches before, and you can blend 2 images together to then bring out a whole new set of options. This is a little catalog I made for myself. So I think if you get the hang of Midjourney and you see it part of, you see it as part of your workflow, I would suggest bringing a catalog for yourself. So for this one, I I used those initial credits that I got out of Midjourney subscription to start generating a design catalog. So I just started putting in words and seeing like single words. So just cube, just square, just sphere, just torus, and start understanding, okay, this is where it goes with like these different shapes. This is different graphic design terminology. So brand name, brand icon, logo art, color scheme, iconography, typography. So this is a little bit of a window into the AI's brain, because when you ask for a cube, you're not just getting a cube. It's doing a bunch of funky stuff to it. When you ask for a square, it also is yielding a cube at times, but the association to a cube versus the association to a square is just slightly different. Same thing with a sphere versus a torus, right? We start to see how it does. It wants to do like these patterns or these spirals occasionally. If we put in pyramid, right, it makes that association to the pyramids of Egypt, right? Pyramid is not the geometric name for that shape, right? But to understand that it's going to make some cultural references to certain images, and you may not get exactly what you intend out of a word, right? Because it's not really what the word means to you. It's what the AI associates that word according to the library of images that it has. Any questions so far? Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Cool. So these are just some more examples. So if you ask for color palettes, there's also associations to different color palettes. You'll see that for certain words, it'll do more landscape things or more product render, product photography direction. And for other words, it wants to go towards characters or people. So I don't think that necessarily works out influencing. Like if I use contrast, it's not like I would expect that to influence to have people in the image. But there is a general association that a square or a torus or a sphere is related to objects and landscapes versus specific color palettes being requested relating to portraits or relating to people. These are just some other words that you might associate to a brand. So if you're creating a logo for a company, are they corporate? Do they kind of have like a retro vibe? Are they established or older? Are they minimal in design or do they kind of take that direction? So these can also start to influence that generation of the image. So combining all these, we're thinking, we want to do a logo for a corporate client that would like to, or it it really, you want to, we'll get more into the prompt thing, but the point here is like we're making a corporate logo. We want it to be in a CMYK color palette. We want it to be influenced by a torus shape, and the color scheme is balanced, right? So this is just a few examples of that. So here on the left, we have the prompt retro logo sketch, corporate, minimal, flat on paper. And here we have simple brand logo, black and white, minimal architecture firm. It has a lot of trouble with words, so it's a little tricky to use this for wording. However, you can sort of arrive at a stylized form of text, associate that with a font, and then really get into design. But I think this process works best in terms of logo, as we're talking about, an icon logo. Yeah, so here you see again the blend function in action. So here is a logo, and here's a prompt for sort of a Nike campaign that asked for a logo, and here's a prompt for a Nike campaign that called for a store or a space. And then we see the blend reaction happening there, where you could do like these pop-up spaces. You could also input an image into Midjourney and have it describe it for you. So if you create a rendering or a photograph, you can actually input it there, and it'll feed you back a prompt that you can then use to influence your images to kind of match your own creations. Okay, so that's enough lecture. let's get into Midjourney. So we want to start creating a logo that we can then bring into Blender. So the way that we could start is first coming up with a client we'd like to work with. So this could be anything. I tend to go towards companies or brands that I like to use and buy. So for example, one that could be interesting and one that I think definitely needs some brand help is the brand Razer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap a slash, and then I come up with a list of prompts, and I have all my Midjourney prompts here. If you want to see information on your account, you can hit the info, and then it's going to send a private message only to you, and it'll show you what kind of subscription you have, or if you're on the trial version, and how many minutes you have for creating. So a fast prompt runs you about a minute of cost. And yeah, it'll show you your lifetime usage and whatnot. So with that, we can hit slash and then do imagine, and we can start writing out our prompt. So the prompt here is first we select the subject. So we ask for a logo redesign for the tech company Razer. And let's see. Utilize, or we could not utilize. You don't want to add verbs. We want to do, I was getting mixed up there with Chat GPT. What we want to do for Midjourney is we want to use adjectives and nouns. So a very like, it's a bit of a dry structure, right? But following what we had in our prompt guide, I'll bring that up if you'd like to have that open. And for now, let's just work on this one prompt, and then you could do your own, just to kind of go through the process a bit more in detail. So the subject, right? The subject, we want it to be a logo redesign for the tech company Razer. Then we'll move on to details. So we can say snake imagery, symmetry. They use a lot of neon color on black background. Okay, so that's good amount of detail. Composition. So I've found that closed composition, that term, leads to sort of a straight on view of something. So to give you a bit of reference, I'm going to bring up over here. The logo I used to hype up this workshop, let's see. Okay. So those spaces that I showed for the Nike store, these were a closed composition. So I was asking for like a straight on view. So was this, right? So it ends up doing sort of a closed thing like that. Maybe sometimes it like angles it a little bit, but generally speaking, it's like closed in on the subject. So closed composition, that's what we're going to go for right there. And style. So style, I want to do futuristic, minimal, cybertech. You can also break up words, like cyberpunk is like a style of illustration, but then you could say that high tech, right, is then like another sort of area. So you can like chop these words and merge them together to kind of, it'll sort of like associate these two different styles and like create one on its own, which is pretty interesting. You know, if you could do like abstract impressionist, or you could do archaic futuristic, you know, and like do contradictions and see what you kind of end up with. Color palette. So I already specified color palette earlier. That's fine because I wanted that to focus on part of the details for the logo itself. So this is really, you know, something that you can add at the end if you wanted to have a little bit less influence. The further away these descriptions are from the beginning of your prompt, the more so they just supplement the main goal, right? The main subject. And then we have parameters. So version 5 is the one we're on right now. I'm pretty sure that it automatically is using version 5 now, but at one point when it was very, very new, it would still use version 4 by default. And if you wanted version 5 specifically, you had to call for it. You could also call back different versions like version 4 or 3. And, there's documentation to show a little bit what the differences are there. So any questions on creating a prompt or sort of what considerations that go into generating something that can give something very viable very quickly, very specific?
Nope, I think I got it.
Cool. All right. So if you want to write your own, while I am now just going to hit enter in this chat box, and it'll, if it receives and there's no issues, it'll say right here, waiting to start, and it'll turn orange. And then all we have to do is wait. Once it starts, depending on the demand it has currently from around the world. So we see there, we're not waiting anymore. So there's not too much of a demand. Typically, this process takes about a minute, and you got to really trust it a little bit. So at first, this isn't looking too great. It's looking like a lot more detail than I'd like to have. So it's very, very high detailed, more so than I wanted. And it doesn't really look like a rebrand for the logo that I'm looking for. So I need to adjust this prompt a little bit. So I'll copy it and then paste it. Well, before pasting it, do the imagine command. Paste once more. So I think maybe futuristic minimal cybertech is too distracting. I'm just going to go with minimal. Closed composition was really good because every one of these logos isn't like in an angle, or it's not like on a piece of paper on the table. They're all straight on so that I could easily trace this in Photoshop or Illustrator, which is what we want. So closed composition is working well. Neon color on black background, great. Symmetry, not working so great. We'll add in specifically, we want radial symmetry, which is something that the logo currently incorporates and is very iconic for the brand. We'll take away all this verbiage. We'll just keep it to logo, redesign, razor, perhaps laptops. Maybe it makes that association. Hopefully I don't get a laptop, but if the logo shows up on a laptop, that might not be too bad. Logo, we'll take out snake imagery. It's perhaps too subjective. And we'll say symmetrical from the very beginning, snake logo. And we'll just take out redesign razor laptop. Let's maybe take out the company entirely. Let's just keep it to symmetry, snake logo, and then immediately we want minimal design. I'm going to keep the radial symmetry right there, like mention it again, to really hone it in. Neon color on black background, closed composition, and at the end we have minimal once more. Maybe let's take it out at the end and add simple. I wonder, I'm just going to go ahead and add SVG. SVG is a file type, like a vector file type that we do for logo designs and such, so they're very simple and very usable for 3D or screen printing. So the fact that that file type has a very direct association with the type of aesthetic that I'm going for, I'm going to just test that out now. Also, with all these tests I was running, I was using the Nike brand, which is very, very well known. So it might not have anything in the library that really associates with the Razer brand. Okay. I can work with this. So let's see. If I want to create variations on this, I think my selection is going to be the one on the not sure if the top right or the bottom right. So what I'm looking for here is I sort of have like an infinity sign, which is pretty cool. And it's overlapped, so we kind of get that added level of symmetry. And then all this stuff around it could fade in and out, right? Thinking about bringing this in 3D or how to break apart this image that I have here, I can simplify what's in the middle and I can kind of use that as the icon and then use all this extra stuff. That's just stylized versions of creating an animation for this brand. Because really, this is the logo, this is the icon that I'm looking for. And then this becomes visual language to use alongside the icon. Excuse me. Same goes for the bottom right, although not as much. So what I'll do here is I'll just ask for variations on 2 and 4. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. And to do that, I just click on V2 and V4 to then prompt Midjourney to give me variations on those. While we wait for those, do you have any questions so far? Or how you doing with your own?
I tried to do my own, but I don't have the membership that I thought I had. So I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay. I mean, if you go to Midjourney, to the Midjourney server, you can go to the newbies section. And in these newcomer rooms, you can use this room with other people. So if you're on the trial or if you just got Midjourney, you can go into one of these channels and use the imagine command. And that's where it should work if your subscription hasn't kicked in or if you don't have one, if you're on the trial.
Okay.
Well, the free version, I think, refreshes every month too. There is a free version. It's just pretty, you can get through it in like an hour or two. But also having the subscription allows you to access Midjourney from other channels. Okay. That's pretty neat. I like the bottom right most, just because we kind of get this LED or like really lit up cyan colored cuts here. I like that thrown in with the rest of the color palette, and we'll see later how that plays in 3D as well. And I also like the texture on the snake because now I see how this can simplify even further. If I think of this as black and white, right? It's basically got a dotted hatch on the bottom and top, and then we've got this highlight running alongside the icon. So I can ask for variations on 4 now. We can just kind of keep going down the rabbit hole a little bit. And as for the previous iterations, I don't think this is going to be as successful anymore as what we have going on with the other one. So I'll go ahead and weed that option out. Keep going with this one. Okay. And with that, I'm ready to upscale a couple of these. What's cool is now we have a snake face, like a humanoid snake face showing up here at the top, which can become yet another instance of the brand. They do have like a snake, just so we know what we're talking about here. I'm gonna bring up the brand. This is their current logo, right? What's not great, in my opinion, about this logo is the really, really small tongue on the snakes, because they typically just show up as this green glow at the end of the logo. And overall, I just find these elements like too small with the green highlight and whatnot. They kind of make it work on their products, but I just don't think it's yeah, I think they could use a rebrand. Something a bit more modern. So typically I'd spend a little bit more time searching. I don't think this is the right solution for this brand, but I'm still describing what it is that I'm seeing here that can be usable for me to then kind of take this and add my own twist to it to make it workable. But for the sake of the workshop, I'm keeping it to let's run with it. And instead of rewriting the prompt a few times, which is what typically I do to start really honing in what I want. So let's go with the top right. I'm going to upscale top right. So that's 2, upscale 2. And this refresher button, by the way, runs that portion again. So if I wanted to get more variations at that same point, I can just hit refresh and then it'll run that once more. Do you have yours running? Okay. So now that I have my green logo from the company and I have the logo I generated, I can hit slash blend and I can drop in right here where it says please attach file. Oh, not where it says please attach file, but up here in this little prompt, drag or drop to upload a file. So we can put in that image, we can put in the Razer logo, and we could add additional prompting here. So I'm not going to do that right now. I just want to see what it does. But after the two images, we can add more words to further influence how they're blending together or in generating a completely new image. So we'll see what the blend result is there. Okay. And with that, we've really covered the essentials for Midjourney. So we're a little bit a ways from the break period before we get into the Blender content. But anything you'd want to go over or any questions that you have or like how you could use this or how you could use prompts for certain things?
I don't think I have any like specific questions so far. I think it's cool.
Okay.
Like it's kind of creepy that it like generates stuff that quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Um, what I see this as really is kind of learning how to do concepts like sketching basically through image generation. So rather than doing a whole bunch of mood boarding and then doing a whole bunch of sketching based on your mood boarding, this is basically an assistant to that process. Like you can take images of things that you like. You can then, in your own descriptions, modify them, create your own inspiration, and even start blending sketches in with some of the inspiration that you have and just generate ideas. So something I'll show I'm doing for the comic book that I'm working on. What I did is I used a dodecahedron to basically combine the word dodecahedron, which is like this multiple sided shape, with different words. So I put in like my brand color palette and I added, I was a bit more fancy with the wording of the colors. So cement gray. This is actually charcoal black, the top left. Top right is cement gray, sky blue, blood orange. And it's just a bit of a window again into the brain of the AI, and you know how these words are going to influence what it is that you put through. So we can see here CMYK, because that is the color palette of printer toner. We can actually see we're starting to get some paper folding shapes, right? It's like very paper looking. Whereas if we ask for like a cement gray, obviously we get like a cementish or plasterish texture. Blood orange, it's obviously going to yield oranges. And sky blue, I did not expect to get the yellow. I imagine that's an association to the sun. But the patterns that the dodecahedron lens, and you can use whatever, you could use a sphere or a cube or whatever you want as your baseline to attach these other things. But what I liked here is that the dodecahedron incorporated or influenced the creation of these like fractal patterns, which can be a bit more of a cue into what the other word is doing for that pattern. So what I mean by that is, for example, if I ask for chrome, I start getting these very fluid folds, or like there's a bit of fluidity associated with the word chrome versus this straight edge roughness that's associated with concrete. So metal is a bit less flowy than chrome, but it could also kind of have these organic or folded structures. So it just starts to give you a bit of an understanding on what influence your words are having on an AI by creating your own little library of tests and having a sort of like a baseline to compare it to. You start creating your own design language basically based on just words. So we have nylon, we got vinyl, reflective, denim. Yep. So we were waiting on, oh, I was about to run this again, but in any case, I might just run with this one. And rather than use the background, just do similar to what the original logo had, which was, it went away now, but it has those two. It has like that tri-radial symmetry. And I can kind of do like a quad radial symmetry by tracing this portion here and then rotating it 90. Yeah, those blends are not working well, but it would be some time to like add in some prompts to like direct this a little bit better and get it to improve. It's a process. But yeah, we can run with this for just going over the technical aspects of Blender. As a creative side, as you could see with me explaining and a little bit more deep diving into it, can take a while. I'd say this whole catalog that I have here on the dodecahedron took me about an hour to produce, just because I was also like really experimenting and taking notes of what was happening. So you could probably expedite that a bit more and filter out, not use everything that it spits out. But that creative process of arriving at a prompt can take a little bit. It does save some time in the sense that a lot of these images, especially when you do get something that you really like, such as the Nike logo. I was trying to find all the Nike logos that I'd done, but I can just go to the Midjourney website. If you go into the Midjourney website onto your profile, everything that you've done can show up here. And then you can filter it by grids or just upscales. So when you arrive at something that's really cool, for example, when I was first going through this concept, these are a lot of potential options for a storefront design for Nike that I could propose. And I could just include these images out of Midjourney in my proposal. And I can break this apart in Photoshop, break it apart in 3D, and kind of create more diagrams, create more plans for what that store could look like. But it's almost working backwards from the rendering, right? You create a render, and then you start creating the design deconstructed based on the render after presenting the client with options or presenting the client with a solution. Okay, so we're coming up on our break. Any questions as we wrap up this section of the workshop?
How do you think like plagiarism is gonna come up with this in the future?
So there is a law that was passed that you can't copyright images generated by an AI. Which basically means that nobody that creates an image from an AI owns that image. But you can still profit off that image, right? So do you have to disclose when an image is generated by an AI? That's been the general etiquette. Is there a law that forces that to happen? Not yet. Are there AIs that you upload your AI generated images? There are AIs that you upload your AI generated images into, and it will modify that image so that it doesn't infringe on any copyright material. So with the Nike stuff, for example, I'm getting a lot of Nike logos. I'm getting the word Nike thrown in there a lot. It's fine for the purposes that I'm using it in terms of education or commenting and whatnot, under fair use of copyright. But yeah, it does come and pull into question, if you don't disclose that you're using AI images or that what you're posting is not generated by an image from an AI. It seems like you're in the clear right now, but it's it's unclear if you can make claims on, for example, if you directly use a popular artist's name as part of your prompt, that's generally frowned upon, but it's also not illegal. Can that artist sue you if you end up profiting on materials that, you get from selling, I don't know, merchandise or that as art? it's still such a gray area. Um, what I really see it right now is, in any case, the AI generated image itself isn't ready for use, at least not yet, right? So I see it as part of the design process where I literally take this and I do what I call rationalizing, right? You're taking this thing that the AI is outputting and you're basically treating it as a scaffold or a sketch for you to then go in and say like, well, this is part of the image actually doesn't make any sense. This wouldn't be here, it'd be over there, right? And you're still a designer. You're just redlining the AI. Um, so in that sense, you're in the clear completely in terms of copyright because that's the entire design process is gathering references, gathering inspiration, and then drawing your own judgment or criteria on it. Does that answer your question? Or do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Yeah, it was more of just like a curiosity of like what you thought, because I can see like how there could definitely be arguments that if it's pulling from a database of like images that are already created and then making it into your own, that like it is taken from someone else and not your own brain, you know?
Yeah. It's also it's going to be interesting when a lawsuit like that does happen because then what's going to be very likely is the person putting in a prompt isn't really liable because they don't own the image, right? So the artist would have to sue Midjourney, right, or the company and claim that, they reproduce the artist's work without compensation to them or without, um
Yeah.
but yeah, the company's response to that would be very interesting because they would basically have to prove that the prompt those set of images were created from a mixture of this many hundreds of thousands or millions of images, and that would expose their IP or expose like the how they built their specific version of what we call stable diffusion, which is this process of generating images out of noise. Text to image means a text prompt is the input to do that. So they would have to show their own proprietary process behind stable diffusion to show that, oh, the artist's work actually only influenced like 10% of the image, right?
Yeah.
And that's not enough to claim, any compensation, or you get, it's not like a direct thing like, oh, you influence this 10%, so you get 10% compensation of the proceeds, which would be, now thinking about it, interesting because YouTube has this thing where if you have a clip of Family Guy, it picks it up, it picks up that clip in your video, and then it says, okay, your video made so much money out of advertising, you use 10 seconds of Family Guy video and audio, therefore Fox gets this much out of your video. So
Yeah.
um the tools are there. I think it's just a matter of like time and seeing where this goes, and it's going to take a while before the law catches up, as we seen in the past. um but yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. It's sort of the Wild West still. We're only a year and a half into this thing, so
Yeah. I'm curious to see like what's gonna happen with it.
yeah, it's terrifying and exciting. I agree.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to feel. I'm like quite scared of AI, but it's pretty cool.
I'm scared to be a person that doesn't understand AI. I read this good article the other day. It was titled AI will not replace humans. Humans who use AI will replace humans.
That's actually a good point. I feel like it scares me in the fact that I'm so young in my career that by the time I get deep into my career, that this will probably be like a very big thing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So,
what's going to be interesting for you is, do they ban this in your class? Or do you just show up with a bunch of Midjourney renders as
oh
your
my gosh,
concept
yeah, because that
design?
could happen too. That's a very good point, because
Right.
this is a quick way to make
Because
a
my
concept come to life.
right, like my first week, I was told to make 3 models from Monday to Wednesday. Um, Physical models, right? So
Yeah.
if instead you render out 3 models that you could do in 15 minutes or less, and then you just get to work, you're done with in
Yeah.
2 or 3 hours. And if they ask you, what was your concept? What was your process? Like, how did you rationalize this or that or whatever? Or why did you make this space smaller and that one bigger? Like, why did you decide to put a plane there or a stick there? And you're just kind of like, well, the AI did it and I liked it. But you're working in reverse, right? It's like, I liked it because I mean, I don't even think you got if to get away with it. Which ultimately it doesn't matter what your process is as long as you explain it in a way that people can understand. So it's really like putting this plane there creates a smaller space on this side versus a bigger space on that side. So there's a bit more compression going on over here, a bit more expansion going on there, having the user move through this space quickly and then move through this bigger space slowly. So again, that's rationalizing, right? The Midjourney design. It's like you see what it outputs, and then you're working backwards into, well, I like it because this, and that. And you still need design fundamentals, design knowledge to understand why you like what you do like and why other options don't work. So maybe it's a good thing that they ban it just to get that knowledge first and then bring in AI later. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird. Okay. Let's take a quick break. I was scheduled it from 2:50 to 3, but we kind of extended into a Q&A. So let's do, it's 2:57. Let's clock back in at 3:07 and we'll do the Blender portion.
All right.
Cool. All right. I'm going to turn off this jazz and be back at 3:07.